Welcome to my channel Biocatalyst. So today we are starting with the first chapter of Standard 11, that is the living world, and it comes under the first unit, that is diversity in the living world. So under this chapter, the first topic that we are going to cover is the characteristics of living organisms. So earlier in junior classes or in previous classes, we had studied various characteristics of living organisms. So like they grow, they reproduce, they have the ability to sense the environment and respond to it. They have various metabolic reactions. Then they self-replicate, they can interact. So all these characteristics we were studying earlier in the junior classes, but the main thing is that in this chapter we are going to study that which are the most defining characteristics of living organisms, which are not possessed by non-living organisms, or there are no exceptions to it. So let's start. So here in the picture you can see there is a small seedling that is increasing in size. So the first characteristic that we are going to study is growth. Like we had studied that every living organism, they grow. That is, either there is increase in the size of the organism or number of cells that are increasing, or there could be increase in the mass of the organism. So if there is an increase in the size, number of cells or mass, we can consider it as growth. So this is a property or a characteristic of living organism. But let's compare if non-living substances also have certain kind of growth or not. So if we take an example of sedimentary rocks, which has different kind of layers, because different materials deposit on it on the surface over many years, and that's how they grow, that is, they increase in size. So it means non-living substances also have some kind of growth, they show some kind of growth. So we cannot consider growth as the most defining characteristic of living organisms, because the non-living structures or the substances also show some kind of growth. The difference is that in non-living organisms, the growth is external, that is, deposition is on the surface, so it is on the outer side, whereas the growth in living organisms is totally internal. Why? Because there is increase in the protoplasm, due to which growth occurs. So let's go to the next characteristic. So here you can see a nice picture of a nice cute dog and a nice puppy, and what I want to say is, what kind of property is it? Reproduction. So what is reproduction actually? It is giving birth to young ones, or to continue the generation, so that there is a new offspring. So this is one of the basic characteristic of living organisms, that they keep on multiplying, so that there is a continuity of the offsprings. So this is a basic characteristic of living organisms. But there are exceptions, because there are many living organisms that do not reproduce. For example, mule. You must have heard about it, that mule is an animal which is actually a hybrid, and it is formed by crossing a donkey and a horse, and it is actually sterile. So what does sterile mean actually? Sterile are those organisms that cannot reproduce. They are incapable of producing an offspring. So mule is a sterile animal, but still it is a living organism. So there is an exception that it does not reproduce, but we are considering it as living. Then there is another example, that is the worker honeybees. So these are also sterile bees. They work, but they do not reproduce. So that is why they cannot have another offspring from these bees. So but still they are living. Then there are infertile couples. Infertile couples. that cannot have babies, but still they are also living creatures, so or living organisms. So reproduction is a characteristic of living organism, but not a defining characteristic of living organisms, because it is there are exceptions to it. So let's go to the next one, metabolism. So this is the third property of metabolism. So what is metabolism? Actually, all living organisms are made of chemicals, and these chemicals are constantly made and changed into biomolecules by metabolic reactions. So there are various kinds of metabolic reactions that keep on going in our body, that is respiration, digestion, excretion, various kind of these reactions. So this is actually a defining characteristic of just the living organisms, because a non-living structure, that is a table or a chair or plastic or anything which is non-living, does not have any kind of metabolic reaction within them. So this is exclusively or the most defining characteristic of living organisms. So that's the one. Now we go to the next one, that is the fourth property. So this is response to stimuli. So response to stimuli. So actually all the living organisms, they respond in certain way to their environment. So for example, you can look at the picture here. There is a person is touching its finger on this plant, and I hope you know the name of the plant. It is touch me not, and which is also known as Mimosa pudica. So its leaves are very sensitive to touch, it is sensitive to pressure, any kind of pressure. So as soon as somebody touches the leaves quickly fold because it responds to it. So that is the kind of response that living organisms give. For example, even you are watching this video and listening to my conversation, but the thing is that as soon as somebody passes by or a friend calls, you will know, either you will be startled by the ring of the phone, or if someone passes by, you'll roll your eyes or turn your neck around and respond. So this is a basic characteristic of living organisms. But is the non-living structure or a substance, are they going to respond? So no, the table or the chair won't know if the phone is ringing. So again, this is the most defining characteristic, or we can say one of the most defining characteristics of living organisms. So let's go back and just revise with what we did. So we did the four characteristics, that is growth, reproduction, metabolism, and response to stimuli, out of which we can say growth is a characteristic of a living organism, but not a defining characteristic of living organisms, because there can be growth seen in non-living structures too. The next one is reproduction, where it is a characteristic of living organisms, but because there are exceptions, there won't be any. This won't be again a defining characteristic of living organisms. Then is metabolism, which is exclusively of the living organisms, and response to stimuli. So again, I can take one example of response to stimuli. That suppose if there is someone very sick and he is in coma, and he does not respond to the environment. If somebody comes and touches him, or inject, the nurses or the doctors, they come and inject the fluids or the medicines, so the person won't respond externally. But is there any kind of response that goes on internally, that is the digestion or the respiration or the heartbeat? So yes, even if the person is not moving, if he is in coma, then also he's going to respond internally. So that is why we can say that response to stimuli is one of the most defining characteristic of the living organisms. So today we have covered the most defining characteristics of living organisms, and tomorrow we are going to also start with various kind of organisms and how they are grouped, taxonomy and systematics. So thank you. If you like my video, please like and share, and do subscribe my channel. Thank you.